In an 1892 photo from a New York convent, archaeologists found a hidden symbol, unexplained. Before we start, just a reminder, if you enjoy this kind of content, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get to the video. The discovery. Dr. Isabella Moretti has spent the last 15 years of her career studying religious iconography in North America, but she never expected to find something so puzzling in the dusty archives of the New York Historical Museum. It was October afternoon del 2023, while cataloging a collection of historical photographs donated by the Archdiocese, she stumbled upon an image that would forever change her understanding of American religious history. In the photograph, printed on albumen paper and framed by the characteristic sepia edges of the Victorian era, showed the inner courtyard of what appeared to be a convent. In the lower right corner, a faded ink inscription read, St. Catherine's Convent, New York, September 1892. Isabella ajusted her magnifying glass and carefully examined the image. At first glance, it seemed like a typical religious photograph of the era. A group of nuns posed serenely in their convent's cloister, dressed in dark habits and long white veils. Their expressions were peaceful, with hands clasped in front of their bodies in an attitude of prayer. The stone columns and ivy climbing the diablos created an atmosphere of contemplative peace. But something about the image troubled her. There was a quality to the light that seemed unnatural, as if the sun selectively illuminated certain parts of the cloister while leaving others in inexplicable shadows. Isabella has studied thousands of 19th century photographs and was well familiar with the technical limitations of the era, but its light distribution defied basic laws of optical physics. Though when she saw it, carved discreetly onto the stones the background arch, barely visible unto the strange illumination, was a symbol que modified hold her breath. An inverted triangle with three internal circles, carved with a precision that dramatically contrasted with the Gothic architecture of the convent. Isabella has seen the symbol before, but not in Christian contexts. Her studios of ancient iconography familiarist med los similar symbol en hermetic, alquímica y la canestos tradiciones que preside cristianati basen todos, pero ancient iconografia farsom, on travillas que hoy estar muy probaent, e castomo reti de cross dimensientus astrimus de scenario practically impossible un cielo potut. Waketo ya discoveroi de intrigue de lavma? Accordiorec diocesan records de dascimentri modera convento que naiam de giormadanino shurs in theory.
This is extraordinary. Isabella Mormad, she reviewed diocesan archives on her laptop, a photograph of a convent that officially never existed, with a symbol that shouldn't be in a Christian context.
Marcus Webb, a historian specialized in 19th century religious architecture, and Petro Sarah Chen, an expert in forensic analysis of historical photographs, and Petro Sarah Chen, an expert in forensic analysis of historical photographs, and Petro Sarah Chen, an expert in forensic analysis of historical photographs, and Petro Sarah Chen, an expert in forensic analysis of historical photographs, and Petro Sarah Chen, an expert in forensic analysis of historical photographs, and Petro Sarah Chen, an expert in forensic analysis of historical photographs, and Petro Sarah Chen, an expert in forensic analysis of historical photographs, and Petro Sarah Chen, an expert in forensic analysis of historical photographs, and Petro Sarah Chen, an expert in forensic analysis of historical photographs, and Petro Sarah Chen, an expert in forensic analysis of historical photographs, and Petro Sarah Chen, an expert in forensic analysis of historical photographs, and Petro Sarah Chen, an expert in forensic. Marcus has brought copious architectural plans for all known convents in New York during the 1890s, que Macheron había usado with her workstation with specialized software to usar with tomnigando more photographs. This open-able for both to point, just to parallel bachi pato ba machiribade, and the dofendo de stambanda to brado bachi benki vinazenixto. Canetons coen a panto problem kits of the nature donde dan, fulzazen rodomain sabon tomaron lemidi. Morovero, il architecter sites crumismelear photograph dadas den el tozegante altonextaul, un fono bero narcas dios, fetivo basante to the period stopia vidar free. Sara obentoben compadre, fotomonove para los authentics to the period. Fotomonoveberado región, un fotovento period of authentic to the period, fotomonoveberado región, fotomonover Isabella Ponte do symbol in the arch. Can you see this? The inverted triangle con the three circles. Even researching its origin and what I found is disturbing. Using her projector, Isabella showed the team a series of comparative images. The symbolo 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 comparative images. To Orthodox Christian doctrine. In the Hermetic tradition, the symbol represents inversión de Divini Trinity, Isabel explained. Juntra circle simboliza feminine aspects of divinity, while invertic tradilclo representa symbols dom descende con de vasto divinity, while invertic tradilclo representa symbols dom descende con de vasto divinity, while invertic tradilclo representa symbols dom descende con de vasto divinity, while invertic tradilclo representa symbols dom descende con de vasto divinity, while invertic tradilclo representa symbols dom descende con de vasto divinity, while invertic tradilclo representa symbols dom descende con de vasto divinity, while invertic tradilclo representa symbols dom descende con de vasto divinity, while invertic, and more importantly, while does none of the nuns in the photograph seem to notice Sarah de examining the image in greater detail. There's something else strange here, she said, pointing to the figures of the nuns. Look at their eyes. They're all looking in the same direction, but not at the camera. It's as if they were observing something we can't see. Isabella followed the direction of the nuns' gases y reales como Dios directed a a specific section of the cloister, an area con remaining deep shadows despite the apparent sunlight of the day. We need to investigate more deeply, Isabella decided. Que no did investigate more deeply, Isabella decided. Que no did investigate more deeply, Isabella decided. Puchan de to for grab and dismayed at the bararnishom, que no diritanya who avelo dio fa these messages reaching. Comment below and tell me which city or country you're watching from. Isabella's investigation led her to the deepest archives of the Archdiocese of New York, where century-old documents lay in dusty boxes, incompletely catalogued and rarely consulted. After weeks of meticulous searching, she finally found a reference that made her stop breathing. In a recordo eclesiastical properties de 291, delia monoamos legible entry que tontapari acquisition of the Blackwood property por spiritual retreat purposes. The entry que to perform por moviaje confob, spiritual retreat purposes. Further investigation revealed that the Blackwood property había a private mansion built in 1847 by Cornelius Blackwood, a wealthy merchant who'd magician put a fortune in the spice trade with the Oriente. But the Blackwood family history was plagued with rumors and scandals the newspapers of the era barely dared to hint at. Isabella found fragmentary references in personal diaries, in private correspondence suggesting Cornelius Blackwood had been involved in esoteric societies and occult practices. And 1889 article in the New York Herald vaguely mentioned pagan rituals and diabolic symbols found in the mansion after Blackwood's death. Pero most intriguing was a letter dated August 1991 written by Archbishop Michael Corrigan to an unidentified recipient. The situation at the Blackwood property requires our immediate intervention. Reports of irregular activities have reached our ears, and we cannot allow such practices to continue under any circumstances. I have decided to establish a temporary religious presence on the property to purify the place and ensure that any malevolent influence is eradicated. The Sisters of the Order of St. Catherine have agreed to establish a temporary mission on the property. El presenso de constante prayos colon en pimpiteon comentimio, obermosten insiste que notos operación pibe solo un pimputeo compinamiasio, de pasenso tomano anedo comprem su operación asocio hana te proportivan, o batupito po eso somen a per confirmas en stricte secrecy. Y el me que aprasil son de te compre más también tumos a pedar a bono maputo tu, Det var ju massor som spörstummen om valo. Det kan man si pedaron och pida propora desidado la defenso. Isabella felt she was beginning to understand the true story behind the photographer. Och per fuori de soppare na fotonk, och pete was der ken Europano figlortam no dia. De sande her story lo betupanas ven Europano caprabaf. De sa che portugan il long du brapore dinero, dete le stricte story in ponto jav. Jav sabel besulemas del lopol de so mon colores story mono compremasi le lubola socia che racconte pol de story. O momero numara palo compremasi. Catherine's convent, a novena convent atol. Para Secret Church Mission purify a properte que llave usado occult practices. Parisona defend the mystery of the symbolo. I the nuns had been sent specifically to purify a properte que llave usado de atoric influences o had a hermetic symbolo come to be carved into the cloister wall. Isabella decidió to investigate magatekegoria modelo di storia fernaure dos tacticatal thin. Con su discovery il fereció abo di fatiarono mio fene perplexit. According official church records, de ore dos tacticatal daele benabot win milla, ero coraviol el diorseo, isparo di ofenioheads. Pues cobri no bot min pensionet, a forlicerino pues cobri que recorri suisunanoca. Isto es terrei toda, el jabaya spate chepgaf. Marcus has been investigating the architecture of the Blackwood Mansion. He found the original plans of the property, he reported, spreading several technical drawings across the table. The mansion had an inner courtyard that exactly matches what we see in the photograph. Para que siento pada tulone la piden mastilo por bay, toda espada a su rey, pues esienal no lo vea dombrendlo. Como tico thom, daun il goming a dos orquienten la bocire sabliari, kilon simbole de tulechen. Tumpasi un palamboriste dios, policomete bilix torsaba. Diso pile bioce ni me bidodo zubiedde come do no banchuam kiente caba, ple bioce ni me bidodo tila stu bontado sabe, paramo del nome intiva table dom noma, tile biodo stronto remansius fato. Il est sofente la manzitu, o modanam borisodo, tumpa domo dos cavalieri chevalier bano tumpa sobatu. Per tema de fellows aba, do tiendo na dama sinana talasti kama de ticum pado manele din sobre na soba sa, tumpa domo dom simpio mando itier in loma, e saba soma tumpa domo mati chal di ti soba sendo nugo, tu nel serita de kama do popilo para sa, tintu e blir sabni soba, tintu e blir sone subietta madalla dio, me fatintu e blir soba tu quaque soba tu giote, puladin torgata soba plasaba, tintu e blir on her screen. Sarah showed an enhanced version of the photograph reactions a todos estorino digitally lightened. In the area pues the nuns directed the gazes, an additional figura pues the no visible, a woman dressed differently from the others, con a cloth of the sim of tiemo bao levarote, and a symbol hanging from her neck. De esa figura euda había sovas esto del original photographer. Sarah continued, it only appears when I adjust the contrast and brightness level. It's as if adipedo it's obscured, pero no completely erased. Isabella examined a figura. The woman appeared older than the other nuns, and her posture suggested authority. Pero most disturbing was the symbol hanging from her neck. It was identical to the one carved in the stone arch. I think we found the superior of the secret mission, Isabella said, and I think she knew exactly what kind of place the Blackwood Mansion was. The investigation automó 1892 fotografadas documenten nor an ordinary convent, para cover church operaciono, pitanarbona something be considera spiritual threat, para que presencio de hermetic symbol en de giron figure suggeste de situación, pues much po complex than official records indicated. Isabel la madotual de decisión to serpo de coner location of the former Blackwood Mansion. If the building still existed, isapada kishnor humanoaman chomen spirituals ab expanded on simui chomen 22, till the 13 to Bathal de Franasi, to candor that trouser comusha mondariz were not as a poricinator in Antiochen kidisadis, nave pari resort from name and shipal archives and historical libraries, to finally located the original address. 2047 East 73rd Street, on Manhattan's Upper East Side. Quathif audience your frebo de site lo britiamazo de bewilder. Instead of a historic mansion or even ruins, Ivales a modern apartment building constructed a Dublin 1960s. According to records, Ivales todos hoyenturdion te kaften building deriva al te kaften binniamtran, cos obscure saban studio have been sold or destroyed. 30 years after the photograph, Marcus observed, why did they wait so long to demolish it? Well, Isabella attempt investigating the property records. He had discovered the serious transfers. The property changed hands multiple times between 592 and 1592, 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 en 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 1592. Look at this, Quena, ki madag sa indicada, discombat na pest with a snooker before na fair ki majimat. Examining me closely, the team discovered a scumbum subtly carved into the concrete, so worn by decades of foot traffic that they were barely visible. But when Isabella photographed them from a certain angle, she could distinguish familiar shapes. They're hermetic symbols. Isabella confirmaba analyzing the photographs. Samo carvar carbano to the concrete comparativa dates to the go. Investigation do construction records, reflection bavia pucultura. Inameten ku kotilaus to the Paris. Isabella was camor por domber da todum finte po. Ikaidrapike particular to remote contas kepato remote petit construction company which had operated in New York for only 3 years before disappearing without a trace. This can't be coincident, Marcus Stad. Someone wanted to ensure the site was remembered, even after the mansion was destroyed. Isabella decided expand her investigation to the construction materials from the demolished mansion. If some of the architectural elements had been salvaged, they might contain additional clues about the symbol and its meaning. The search led a door to quella material de rapullos depot in Queens, where elements from demolished historic buildings were collected, or exploration detalles, or restoration projects. The owner, an elderly man named Giuseppe Torino, had inherited the business from his father and maintained meticulous records of all materials that had passed through their hands. Blackwood, Blackwood, Giuseppe murmured as he reviewed his yellowed record books. Yes, here it is. 1900. My father bought several architectural elements del Melusion, agolums, arches, some carved stones. Vedo ben somte disastronia, y que porcho hafet.
You leading to the back of the depot.
You led to the back of the depot, where older elements were stored under dust-covered tarps. My father always said there was something wrong about the Blackwood stones, said they gave him nightmares when he touched them. Eventually he sold them all except for one piece that no one wanted to buy. Under an especially thick tarp, Giuseppe revealed a partially intact stone arch. Isabella merely recopinat Isabella piantasias ilimilia setri comuca pierno en a su photograph, on a chas ilimilia crot di fotograto. En lo facet on naturalmente un ejiltrueth en a unter century go trails and burtrad. Bywes change stuff in minds at the last moment, or have accidents before they can pick it up. My father sido the stone didn't want to be moved. Sarah immediately began documenting the arch with her photographic equipment. Under different types of lighting, the symbols seemed to change subtly, as if there were multiple layers of carving superimposed. This is extraordinary, Sarah said. The symbol wasn't simply carved into the stone. It was carved using a technique que te create optical effects depending on the angle of light. Iso abarriember de técnicas optico-magnéticas optici, Isabella examined the comment of pipont le carica. De es lo pico perialo pico 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 perialo pico pico perialo pico perialo pico pico perialo pico pico pitpoens. These inscriptions, Isabella decida. Luste como icónico per un lower throats, a tulsi cachormen ofinian topodamte cambo atopentravnao, asisom, vodko en al free, nantius istel zelfs contrid zelfs, un procel tu ansalten, il jusen tuntonatu, legionia afrisun, mica jonia fus tumor, if aquellos disedos bidje much preciso. Fuzifilato, lus tumor pisum, bigo ochum situlaf is a thing, bino bala pripsas. Bumeste dupas measures un law. Iris pucodus, big growing to laugh is at fin sale. Mucurde of wealth and of offenadis, but he gente divis patadl, binomala presses ut paudos pressil letso. Gitos elegewegnusum, gitos tomte dan into sintuath is again to us, more into perspectum disin to us. Mos potashis subsatel, bogasira porcento manja to kepetsuno totos, borcado bluedzo por potunatopelsos, mostopola presses in motsos, borcat noto silomato patosomis e pensofulo muspesuanto skeleto. Borcat noto popofituas. My father mentioned madavia tomo supervisors de melusien. Sai de vuestra amorta an ordinary contractor. He vuestra moas need exactly which pieces to save and which to destroy. Había to show a specific acknowledge more ancient. Do you remember that man's name? Isabella asked. Giuseppe reflected for a moment. I think his name Whitmore. Henry Whitmore. My father said he spoke as if he knew the history of every stone in the mansion. Isabella feltavo e aproximamoes, importante en VIP. De nama Henry Whitmore combi de Kio e aprieta astanando l'uni estaro da Blackwood Mansion, para que stiente que l'oxi de noxitos do Blackwood Mansion, para que stiente que l'oxi da John Thomas en clino bridado prawath, ando bresel pinque l'oxideo que ne pera fufugis, do bresel pinque l'oxideo mitovalles podak farovi. The search for Henry Whitmore led Isabella to the genealogical archives of the New York Historical Society, where she discovered that Whitmore had been much more than a simple demelusim purfaisor. Henry Whitmore had been a member of the Hermetic Society of New York, an esoteric organization secret de seconda socorieti. The records of the Hermetic Society, que beab the United Columbia University's library in 1954 and review public complex network of inisuplicatuales, artists, and wealthy merchants who had dedicated themselves to the study of Western esoteric traditions. Cornelius Blackwood had been one of the founding members. This explains everything, Isabella said as she reviewed the documents with Marcus and Sarah. Blackwood wasn't simply an eccentric merchant. Evis partaron garanausmo refida beteca societico. De su puiche do hermeticismo, alchemy in other esoteric traditions, de spirim podia que te daluda ferto in gafomara mosi, utes wanse fora belfoba. De si puiche dos privola segna de latin, odnier que te diprema tabratia fuego meticida fi. Do di creverudorio de la base sin eftenenetisank. Barmos breviena sin caramba estada autimos e todo aro Cornelius Blackwood's betod. Master Blackwood have closely completed, or pragwernos completed, or Blackwood, Master Blackwood. Master Blackwood have skeptically vurnoro maternelo pa seidil prengari. Motorlón de la parmoni con tutte il cabido mocenedos. Cen formige che stavo nell'obi e alleggiato muen senedaria sofferentia when un conto zonteri. Genasido te almer da fincio en sole biese. Tutrinato en chorubiki kenshin, de simbolto descending wisdom, a suan inverte triangola de tres círculos, tre quien somres da fotograf, in de salvaged arches, marinding wisdom, sarà joeg de ken alaisando dates, in de bernantogens important connexion, hoper de saro gon, can august de sabelo dates, homanes with siempre mato property, in September pero al cordune disa records, Henry Whitmore dina supervis de demelusino nel dacinto per i tres, morto per 30 years later. Qual Whitmore dines de 30 years, Marcus wonder. I fatoglia sia belpino, Isabella found Henry Whitmore's personal diary in the Hermetic Society archives. Whitmore had been Blackwood's youngest disciple, and after his master's death, he had dedicated his life to preserving and protecting the society's esoteric legacy. The diary revealed that Whitmore kept monitoring the Blackwood mansion throughout the entire period of the church purification. He had meticulously documented the nuns' activities and observed some tecatequín tu nos parti comada y amadurto en bicapritos, amans matiquellos bien church purification. He had meticulously documented the nuns' activities and months after the photograph was taken, the sisters of the so-called Order of St. Catherine are not what they seem. I have observed their nocturnal rituals, and I recognize elements that do not belong to Orthodox Christian tradition. They use symbols that are familiar to me, but inverted, as if they were practicing a form of Christian Hermeticism that the official church would not recognize. The superior, in particular, shows knowledge of Blackwood's work. I have seen her trace the symbol of descending wisdom in the air during her prayers, and I have noticed she wears a medallion containing the same symbol. It's as if the church had sent heretics to combat heresy. More disturbing still, I have observed that the symbol in the sanctum has begun to respond to the sister's presence. During certain lunar phases, it emits a subtle light that cannot be explained by natural means. It's as if the sister's presence had activated some aspect of Blackwood's work that had remained dormant. Isabella read this entry several times, trying to process its implications. If Whitmore was right, the nuns sent to purify the mansion had actually been secret practitioners of esoteric traditions, and their presence had somehow activated the hermetic symbol. But there was more. A later entry, dated November 1892, described an event that explained why the photograph had captured that strange light distribution. Tonight I witnessed something that defies all rational understanding. During the new moon, the sisters performed a ritual in the cloister courtyard. It was not a Christian ceremony, but something much older. They invoked names I recognized from the most arcane hermetic texts, and the symbol of descending wisdom responded with a light that illuminated the entire courtyard. But most extraordinary was that a photographer was present, documenting the event. He was not an ordinary photographer, but someone who clearly understood the importance of what he was witnessing. He took multiple exposures, but only one captured the symbol's light. The others showed only an ordinary scene of nuns in prayer. He believed this photograph will be preserved as evidence that Blackwood's work continued even after his death, and that there are forces within the church itself that understand and preserve the esoteric traditions they officially condemn. Isabella felt she was finally beginning to understand the true story behind the 1892 photograph. It had not been a simple documentation of a convent, but the record of an extraordinary esoteric event where Hermetic and Christian traditions had merged in a way that defied orthodox categories. But this raised new questions. Who had been the photographer who documented the event? And what had happened to the nuns of the Order of St. Catherine after their mission at the Blackwood mansion had ended? The search for these answers would lead Isabella to even more extraordinary discoveries about the intersection between Christian mysticism and esoteric traditions. The investigation into the true identity of the photographer led Isabella to the archives of the New York Photographic Society, where she discovered that the initials in the photograph did not refer to Henry Whitmore, but to Harold Weston, a photographer specializing in documenting religious and esoteric events. Weston had been an enigmatic figure in New York's artistic circles during his photographs, now considered masterpieces of early photographic art, had captured not only conventional social and religious events, but also secret society meetings and esoteric rituals that were rarely documented. Weston's personal archive, preserved at the New York Public Library, contained correspondence that revealed his deep connection with the city's esoteric communities. A letter dated August 1892, addressed to a recipient identified only as Sister, provided the context Isabella had been seeking. Dear Sister Aimee, I have received your request to document the special works your order will perform at the Blackwood property. I understand the importance of preserving evidence of these events, especially given the climate of suspicion surrounding any practice that deviates from strict orthodoxy. As we discussed, I will use special photographic techniques to capture both the exoteric and esoteric aspects of the ritual. The main exposure will show a scene of conventional Christian devotion, but I have developed methods to also record the more subtle manifestations that may occur during the work. I trust these images will serve as testimony for future generations that the perennial wisdom finds expression even within the most orthodox forms of faith. Isabella felt she was approaching the central truth of the mystery. Sister ought to be the superior of the nuns, the hidden figure that Sarah had discovered in the shadows of the photograph. Further investigation in ecclesiastical archives revealed the identity of this mysterious figure, Sister Magdalena Thorne, a nun who had been educated in Europe and had returned to the United States with impeccable credentials, but with a reputation for excessive mysticism among her superiors. Records showed that Sister Magdalena had been the founder of a reformist branch of the Order of Saint Catherine, which had been officially dissolved in Misiones Orientationes, but had continued operating in secret under her leadership. This secret order had developed a unique synthesis between Christian mysticism and Hermetic traditions, creating what they called Gnostic Christianity. A particularly revealing document was a letter from Sister Magdalena to Archbishop Orrigan, dated September 18. However, I must inform you that my order has developed specialized methods for dealing with esoteric influences that may differ from traditional Orthodox approaches. Our studies have revealed that certain Hermetic symbols and practices are not inherently malevolent, but represent aspects of divine wisdom that have been preserved outside the Church's official channel. Rather than simply exorcising these influences, we propose integrating them within an appropriate Christian framework. I trust our methods will produce the desired results, although the process may require techniques that are not widely known within conventional ecclesiastical practice. Isabella realized she had discovered evidence of a Christian esoteric tradition that had operated in secret within the American Catholic Church. During the 19th century, the Reformed Order of Catherine had been an organization that had attempted to reconcile Hermetic traditions with Christian doctrine, creating a synthesis that had been too radical for official acceptance. Sarah had continued her analysis of the photograph and had made an additional discovery that confirmed this theory. I've been examining the hand gestures of the nuns in the photograph, she reported. At first glance, they appeared to be in conventional prayer position, but when I magnify the images, I can see they're forming specific mudras that I recognize from Western esoteric traditions. Marcus had been investigating the final fate of the Reformed Order of St. Catherine. According to the records, I found the order was officially dissolved for the second time in 1823, a year after the photograph. But there's evidence that the sisters continued their practices in secret, establishing small communities in various eastern cities. Isabella had found a final clue in Weston's archives, a series of photographs taken in 1893, showing the same nuns from the Blackwood photograph, but now in a completely different setting. They were in what appeared to be a private library, surrounded by ancient texts and esoteric symbols. A note on the back of one of these photographs, written in Weston's handwriting, read, "The Guardians of Hidden Wisdom, Final Record Before Dispersal, H.W. Yotesin," a religious order that attempted to preserve and Christianize Hermetic traditions, operating in secret within the Catholic Church. The 1892 photograph doesn't just document an event, but the culminating moment of this tradition before its forced disappearance. But Isabella knew there was still one crucial question to answer. What had actually happened during the ritual at the Blackwood mansion, and why had the Hermetic symbol responded with that extraordinary light that Weston had managed to capture in his photograph? The answer to this final question would reveal not only the truth about the 1892 photograph, but also the existence of a spiritual tradition that had remained hidden for more than a century. The search for the truth about the ritual at the Blackwood mansion led Isabella to a discovery that would forever change her understanding of American religious history. In the private archives of the Weston family, she found the photographer's complete diary, which contained a detailed description. The entry for September 21, 42 provided the first-hand testimony Isabella had been seeking. "Tonight I witnessed something that defies all conventional categorization." Sister Magdalena and her order did not come to exorcise Blackwood influence, but to complete his work. They had been studying his writings for months, and had concluded that his great work had remained incomplete. The ritual I witnessed was neither purely Christian nor purely Hermetic, but an extraordinary synthesis of both traditions. The sisters invoked both Christian saints and Hermetic forces, creating what Sister Magdalena called a bridge between worlds. When they began their invocations, the symbol in the arch began to emanate a light that was not of this world. It was not simply an optical illusion, it was a real manifestation of energy that I was able to capture on my photographic plate. The light seemed to respond to the specific words the sisters chanted, pulsing in synchrony with their voices. But the most extraordinary occurrence was when Sister Magdalena approached the symbol and placed her hands upon it. For a moment, all reality seemed to shift. The corridor, filled with spectral figures I recognized as the deceased members of Blackwood's Hermetic Society. It was as if the symbol served as a temporal portal, allowing past and present to coexist. Sister Magdalena spoke with these figures in a tongue I did not recognize, but which seemed to be an archaic form of Latin mixed with Hebrew and Greek elements. The spectral figures appeared to be transmitting knowledge teachings that had been preserved beyond death. Isabella felt a chill reading this description. If Weston was right, he had documented not just a ritual, but a genuinely supernatural event, where esoteric knowledge had been transmitted directly from beyond. But there was more. The entry continued. After the spectral figures vanished, Sister Magdalena explained to me the true purpose of their mission. They had not come to destroy Blackwood's work, but to preserve and transmit it. They had developed a doctrine that held that all genuine wisdom, regardless of its origin, was a manifestation of divine wisdom. According to their teaching, Hermetic symbols like the one Blackwood had installed in his mansion were not diabolic, but fragments of a primordial revelation that had been dispersed through different traditions. Their order had dedicated itself to gathering these fragments and reintegrating them within a Christian framework. Sister Magdalena showed me texts they had compiled, demonstrating connections between Hermetic symbols and the deepest Christian mystery. The inverted triangle, with 3 circles, she explained, represented the divine Trinity manifesting in the material world, while the circles symbolized the 3 theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity. Isabella realized she had discovered evidence of a completely lost theological tradition, one that had attempted to create a synthesis between Christianity and Western esoteric tradition. This tradition had been so radical that it had been suppressed by both the official church and conventional esoteric societies. Sarah had been analyzing Weston's additional photographs and had made a discovery that confirmed the photographer's description. I found the photographic evidence of the spectral figures Weston describes, she reported. Using multispectral analysis techniques, I can detect faint human forms in areas of the photograph that appear empty to the naked eye. Marcus had been investigating the final fate of Sister Magdalena and her order. After 1893, the sisters dispersed throughout the country, he explained. But they maintained secret correspondence, and there's evidence they continued their practices in small communities well into the... Isabella had found the final piece of the puzzle in a letter from Sister Magdalena to Harold Weston, dated December 8. Dear Harold, I thank you deeply for having documented our work at the Blackwood Mansion. Your photograph will serve as testimony for future generations that the perennial wisdom cannot be destroyed, only transformed. We have completed the great work that Cornelius Blackwood began. The symbol now serves not as a portal to invoke external forces, but as a reminder that the divine manifests through multiple traditions. We have Christianized Hermeticism and Hermeticized Christianity, creating a synthesis that honors both faith and reason. Order will be officially dissolved, but our work will continue in secret. We have trained successors who will carry this tradition forward, preserving the knowledge until the world is ready to receive it openly. The photograph you took captures the exact moment when 2 worlds touched. May it serve as evidence that God's mysteries are vaster than any orthodox doctrine can contain. Isabella closed the archive with a sense of awe and respect. She had discovered not only the story behind the mysterious photograph, but evidence of an extraordinary spiritual tradition that had attempted to reconcile faith and esoteric knowledge. The 1892 photograph was not simply a historical document. It was testimony to a moment when the supernatural had intersected with the mundane, where past and present had merged, and where a small order of brave nuns had attempted to preserve a wisdom that transcended sectarian divisions. 6 months after completing her investigation, Isabella Moretti published her findings in a series of academic articles that revolutionized the field of American religious studies. Her work on the Reformed Order of St. Catherine and their synthesis between Christianity and Hermeticism opened new lines of research into esoteric traditions in 19th century America. The 1892 photograph was exhibited at the Metropolitan Museum of Art as part of an exhibition on hidden spiritual traditions in America. Visitors often commented on the disturbing quality of the image, especially the strange light distribution that seemed to highlight the symbol in the arch. Sarah Chen developed new photographic analysis techniques based on her work with Weston's image. Her methods have been used to reveal hidden details in historical photographs worldwide, leading to similar discoveries of lost spiritual traditions. Marcus Webb wrote the definitive biography of Cornelius Blackwood and the Hermetic Society of New York, which became a fundamental text for the study of 19th century American esotericism. The stone arch salvaged from the Blackwood mansion was finally acquired by Columbia University, where it is displayed in the Religious Studies Department as an extraordinary example of syncretic symbolic art. Giuseppe Torrino donated all documents related to the Blackwood mansion demolition to the university archives, providing future researchers access to materials that had been lost for decades. But perhaps the most significant discovery came when Isabella received a letter from an elderly nun at a Vermont convent. Sister Catherine Marie had read Isabella's articles and had decided to reveal a secret her order had guarded for more than a century. The letter revealed that Sister Magdalena's tradition had survived in secret, passing from one generation of nuns to the next. They had preserved the original texts of the Hermetic Christian synthesis, as well as additional photographs by Harold Weston documenting other rituals and events. "We have been waiting for the right moment to reveal this tradition," Sister Catherine Marie wrote. "Your investigations have shown that the academic world is finally prepared to understand and appreciate the depth of wisdom our predecessors preserved." Isabella visited the Vermont convent and spent weeks studying the order's secret archives. What she found confirmed and expanded everything she had discovered about the. There was evidence of a complete network of religious communities that had practiced syncretic forms of spirituality for more than a century. More importantly, Isabella discovered that the tradition continued to live. Contemporary nuns had adapted Sister Magdalena's teachings to the spiritual challenges of the 24th century, creating a form of Christian mysticism that incorporated insights from multiple wisdom traditions. The 1892 photograph was only the beginning, Sister Catherine Marie told her during their final conversation. It documented a moment when two worlds touched, but that touch created ripples that have extended through time. The wisdom that Sister Magdalena and her order preserved remains relevant today, perhaps more than ever. Isabella returned to New York with a new understanding of the photograph that had initiated her investigation. It was not simply a document of past events, but a window into a living tradition that had found ways to survive and adapt through the centuries. In the quiet nights of her office, while reviewing the photographs and documents she had collected, Isabella often reflected on the broader implications of her discovery. The story of the Reformed Order of Catherine suggested that spiritual traditions were much more fluid and adaptable than Orthodox categories suggested. The symbol of the inverted triangle with 3 circles, which had appeared so mysteriously and had become for Isabella a reminder that spiritual wisdom is often found in the spaces between established traditions, in moments when different currents of knowledge meet and create something completely new. In somewhere in Vermont, in a silent convent, where nuns continued the practices initiated by Sister Magdalena, more than a century before, the tradition that had begun at the Blackwood mansion lived on, preserving a synthesis of wisdom that transcended sectarian divisions and offered a vision of what human spirituality might become. The 1892 photograph had finally revealed all its secrets, but in doing so, it had opened doors to even deeper mysteries about the nature of spiritual tradition and the persistence of wisdom through time.